In this video, we are going to continue our discussion on the history of Chinese medicine. We are going to move on to the influential schools of theories. In order to have a better understanding of the background of this period, we will go back to the dynasty flow. As you can see from this dynasty flow, the influential theoretical schools, especially the four schools that actually happened in around 1180 to 1380. So as you can see from the flow, it actually from at the end of Song dynasty till Yuan dynasty. During this period, you can see especially at the end of the Song dynasty, 100 years, and then there was Jin dynasty in between that haven't been highlighted here. For these few hundred years, there were a few changes of the dynastics, which means there were civil wars in China. And this was the background of the development of the theoretical schools. The reason why we need to mention the wars is because the development of Chinese medicine cannot be isolated from the development of the country or also of the population. The reason is because during wars, the diseases may change. For example, during wars, people may be starving because they don't have time for farming, or the process of farming will be disturbed. So they will have more prevalent diseases, for example, due to hunger, due to other disasters. There were a few renowned practitioners that proposed different theories to treat diseases. For instance, the first one, Liu Wanshu, on the theory of fire and heat. He emphasized that all pathogens, such as the wind, the fire, the dampness, the dryness, the summer heat, all related to fire. So in his theory, he thought that many diseases, the fire and heat are actually the root cause of many diseases, because the other pathogens are linked to fire. For instance, the theory actually initially from Huangdi Neijing, because in Huangdi Neijing there were 19 clauses discussing on the pathogenesis of the pathogens. So he further illustrated from the 19 pathogenesis, he further emphasized the heat. For example, the relationship between the wind and the fire. The extreme heat will cause wind. This is in your basic theory. And also the wind will make, for example, when you boil at home, when you try to speed up the burning, you may blow more winds to the charcoal, so it burns better. So from this phenomenon, you can see that the winds can promote fire, which means the fire may be the result from the extreme fire. Severe fire in a human body may be result from the wind, and this wind can be external wind or internal winds, depends on different situation. So he proposed those different diseases. For example, if a patient suffers from external wind, you can use cold methods, cold herbs. In acupuncture, you can use reducing techniques or cooling heaven, the type of manipulation techniques to reduce the heat in the body. If the fire is internally, you can use some cold herbal medicine to reduce the internal heat. So in this theory, in this school, he proposed that fire is one of the most important root cause of different pathogens. In the meantime, fire can happen in combination of different pathogens. So in his school, he focused on heat and fire. In the treatments, he focused on using cold herbs. So the theory of fire and heat sometimes also calls the school of cold and cool. The second figure is Zhang Yuanshu. Zhang Yuanshu, he proposed Zhangfu Shengzhong differentiation theory. So what he tried to do here is, when he sees patients, he proposed that we need to identify different organs, Zhang organs, Fu organs, the situation of these organs, for instance, yin or yang, cold or heat, excess or deficient. And then from here, excess or deficient, he got a group of herbs that can benefit specific Zhang organs or Fu organs. For example, for heart deficiency, you have a group of herbal medicine. For kidney deficiency, you have a group of herbal medicine and formula to benefit. So in his theory, he proposed the combination of Shengzhong differentiation, especially Zhangfu Shengzhong differentiation, and the clinical applications. These are also one of the main focus in the diagnostic of Chinese medicine nowadays. In the diagnostics, we will have a very heavy weighting on the discussion of Shengzhong differentiation, and these are focused on Zhangfu organs. Zhang Chongzheng, also in the similar age, he proposed the 攻邪论. 攻邪论, the translation is the pathogen elimination theory. So from his theory, he thought that the diseases were from different pathogens, and these pathogens, we need to get the pathogens out of the body. Once the pathogens are out of the body, then we can recover our health. But how to get the pathogens out of the body? There were 3 ways, basically. For example, you can get the pathogen out of the body from the skin, such as sweating. You can get the pathogens out of the body from your mouth, in other words, vomiting, or from diarrhea, from your large intestine, for diarrhea. So this is just a very broad category of sweating, vomiting, and diarrhea, but he further expands the categories of these 3. For example, sweating does not only refer to making patients sweat, but rather all techniques that release the superficial pathogens categorized in sweating, and vomiting as well. Every techniques can move everything from lower part of the body to the upper parts, then we consider as vomiting. And also diarrhea, including to induce urination, could induce diarrhea. These are all considered as diarrhea. So basically into 3 categories. You get the pathogen out of the body from the skin. You can get the pathogens out of the body from your mouth or your anus. So this is 攻邪论. Li Gao, he proposed spleen and stomach theory, 脾胃论. In his theory, this is also very typical why I have to introduce the background of these influential practitioners. All these people happen at the same time, Jin and Yuan period in the history. And Li Gao, in his period, because of the war, the civil wars, many people were starving. So in that situation, most people suffer from spleen and stomach deficiency because of malnutrition. So in his treatments, he focused on tonifying the spleen, recovering the digestive function. Only when the digestive function can be recovered, and then the patient can have a better immune system, have a better living quality. So his theory focuses on spleen and stomach. The next one is Zhu Zhengheng. Zhu Zhengheng and his ministerial fire theory. You can see the difference between Li Gao and Zhu Zhengheng. Zhu Zhengheng is in the 13th century. At that age, it's in Yuan dynasty. At that time, the society became more stable, so there were not much wars. And then the diseases also change, because Zhu Zhengheng also see how the upper class population live. For example, during their diets, they have excessive heat intake or deep fried food intake. So all foods or medicine with hot property, they have excessive intake. In the meantime, because of the society stable, the upper class population, sometimes they have excessive sexual activities. So from Chinese medicine theory, all these declining the yin in the body. So if you have yin deficiency, from the theory we will have relatively yang, excess yang. So this is ministry fire. Because Zhu Zhengheng lived in this type of period, and he saw this type of behavior and also phenomena from the society, and so he proposed the theory of ministerial fires to nourish yin to reduce the heat. So he believed most diseases are due to excessive yang. So if you don't need to stress too much about the theory if you don't pick up the terminologies yin and yang, because we're going to introduce more in the basic theory. When we introduce yin and yang, then you will understand more about the how the yin deficiency results in relatively excess yang. But these are basically from Zhu Zhengheng. That's why his theory also focuses on tonifying yin or tonifying kidney yin more specifically. The last one is Wang Haogu and the yin zheng theory, yin sheng juan theory. So yin zheng theory, 正 is the shengjuan. These are among these 6 authors. These 4 are more famous in terms of their schools and as well as the influence of their theories. For example, Zhu Zhengheng, the ministerial fire theory in Japan, they had a school to do some research on Zhu Zhengheng's theory. The last development in different disciplines in this session, we're going to focus on the epidemic diseases. Epidemic diseases, it should be quite refreshed to all of us because we just passed COVID-19 and everyone experienced this type of epidemic diseases like in person. In Chinese medicine, as we discussed before, the theoretical framework were from Huangdi Neijing, Nanjing. These are the theoretical foundations, and then 神农本草经、伤寒杂病论。神农本草经 introduced the different materia medica. 伤寒杂病论 have the combination of the theory and the treatments, as well as the formula. From the fourth classic until about 200 AD, the Chinese medicine theoretical framework has been established all the way until 17th century, the development of epidemic diseases. Although in the past, we also have some isolated discussion on epidemic diseases, but we don't really have a full concept, comprehensive concepts on epidemic diseases. The reason also because the background of the society, because at that time we don't really have that much epidemic diseases. Wang disease. This is a theory that's developed in the 17th century in the southeast China. 瘟疫论. So 瘟病, in the previous discussion no matter from 诸病源候论, we mentioned the 戾气, but we didn't have further explanation of 戾气. So 戾气 different from the other pathogens. The other pathogens including the wind, the fire, the heat, summer heat. But 戾气is a kind of infectious pathogen. But at that time we don't really know what type of pathogen. But although we don't know the actual substance of the pathogen, but Chinese medicine practitioners know the characteristics of these pathogens. For example, 戾气 have the characteristic of infecting all population. Doesn't have to be specific one, but once you contact, you're going to infect all. And all these patients will have similar presentations. So these are the characteristics. This will contribute to the development of Wang diseases or 瘟病. 瘟疫论 combined in the 17th century as well. 温热论, 温热调变, 温病调变. So this is 温病调变, Bing, and 温热经纬. You can see from these books, and all the books start with 温 means Wang disease. And because of the time, we're not going to introduce in detail about this theory. We will introduce more in the basic theory of the Wang diseases. So the one, 叶桂, the entire theory were initially proposed in 瘟疫论 by Wu Youke. But this theory became popular and famous after 叶桂. 叶桂, he compiled one article, 温热论. But when I say he compiled, it's actually not he compiled. It's just because accidentally this article was recorded in the history. So as you can see, I provide one image here. It's Dongting Lake. Dongting Lake is a lake in the southeast China. It's one of the most beautiful lake in the southeast China and one of the most famous lake in southeast China. 叶桂, he lived around that area. So in the past, what happened today is he was such a famous practitioner, and he has a group of students. When they have time during holidays, they went to the lake to have some retreats, and then during the retreats, the students and 叶桂, the student and teacher, were discussing some medical discussing some topics on Wang diseases. And one of his students, Gu Jingwen, he recorded, or he wrote down exactly what the teacher says, word by word. That's how this article was recorded. And then once he was taking notes of what the teacher said, and then in the meantime he put a note on the side that on the stage, I follow my teacher Ye Gui to have a tour on Dongting Lake. During the tour, and then my teacher says the following topics, explain the following topics. Then I keep a record as my own notes. This article became very popular, and because this is a very brief discussion, this also become very unique in the history. That's only for these a few hundreds of words explain the full comprehensive concept of Wang diseases. For example, the development of the Wang diseases, 戾气, will go through the 4 levels. Previously in 伤寒杂病论, we explained the 6 meridians, but now Ye Gui mentions that the diseases do not have to go through according to meridians one by one, but rather you go through the different level of human body, from superficial to medium to deeper, and the last at the blood level. So he's actually separated into 胃 defensive level, qi level, in nutrition level and blood level. So he said the different development of the disease. And all these we actually can see today. For example, during COVID-19, we can see the initial stage of the disease can be the superficial level. For example, a patient may suffer from colds, chills, fever, cough, and these are all superficial level. And then afterwards, the patient may lose the appetite, depends on the severity of the case, may lose appetite. Just go to the qi level, go to internal organs. And furthermore, if the disease keep developing, the disease may even go to the yin level or blood level. In this situation, you can see that the patient's tongue become red, and afterwards there's no coating on top of the tongue. And even in some situations, you can see some patients will have skin rashes on the skin. So you can see this is actually the full development of the Wong diseases. This is also why I said, although we haven't seen COVID-19 in 2019, 2020, but since the onset of the breakouts of the pandemic, we can treat the pandemic from Chinese medicine. The reason because although we didn't see COVID-19, but we knew the development of these diseases, so we can actually treat at a specific level. We also can try to stop the further development of the diseases. This is also what I said before, that although we didn't see COVID-19, but we have seen COVID-19's grandparents or great-grandparents, because they must share some characteristics which are the same, that we can use the same treatment for these. So Wong disease is actually one of the most common and important theory nowadays to treat epidemic diseases, to treat diseases that are related to exogenous pathogens. This theory is actually also one subject, so it's a very quite comprehensive theory. In a history, we don't have sufficient time to discuss, so this is just a very brief discussion on the Wong disease. The last one is the development of vaccination against smallpox. This is phenomenal developments in Chinese medicine. Smallpox between 1567 and 1572 AD, Chinese medical practitioners developed a technique for relation involving deliberate and infection with smallpox. And this technique has been introduced to Africa, India, and Europe. In Europe, Edwards was successfully have the first case in 1789 AD. As you can see from the age, it's almost 200 years after we have been using the techniques for 200 years. And this type of techniques were popular and introduced over the population in China. Initially, they introduced different techniques. For example, it was recorded 4 techniques. Smallpox closing method. So what they try to do is, kids, when they suffer from smallpox, and then we're going to use the smallpox of the patient, the kids, clothes, to use the clothes to take the clothes of the affected kids and give this clothes to the other healthy kids, try to get the kids infected. The second technique is pox slurry method, slurry. So which means because smallpox will have a blister, and in the blister you will have some liquid. So what they were doing is they use the liquids and put the liquids down with cloth or cotton and put in the nose of a healthy person to infect the healthy person on purpose. The dry pox powder method and the wet pox powder method, these two, what they were doing is the dry pox powder is after recovery. The scar of the smallpox, they take the scar off, they grind the scar into powder and use the powder to blow in the nose of a healthy person to infect the person. And then the wet pox powder is also they're going to use the powder done in the cotton and put in the nose. And you can see these 4 techniques. The first one, smallpox closing. What they try to do here, they actually try to, although at the time they don't know the virus, we call like disea. They try to use the virus, to take some virus to affect a healthy person, but they want to control the amount, because either it's not effective. For example, smallpox closing, it may not be effective sometimes. It may be effective sometimes it may not be effective, just because of depends on the virus on the clothes. The pox slurry methods may be too violent, because smallpox slurry is still the infectious pathogen and it's still violent. So the healthy person, if you infect them on purpose, they may die. That's why further on they develop into dry pox powder methods and wet pox powder methods. For these two, these are actually from recovering patients. So the violence of the virus, as strong as the previous one. So it becomes a safer method. As you can see now, you will see this techniques is actually very similar to nowadays vaccination. Vaccination is exactly the same process as the vaccination against smallpox in the history. That's also why when people ask me in the past few years, will you against, or from traditional medicine point of view or Chinese medicine point of view, will you against vaccination? The answer is no, we don't against vaccination, because but when I say we don't against vaccination, providing this effective, providing it's effective also with minimal side effects, because the theory, the concept of immunology and also vaccination is all not only in 17th century. For example, in 走后备急方 we are introduced the diseases from rabies dogs. It's also similar. You see, all these we try to prevent. We have all these methods proposed, and that's also why smallpox have been disappeared in China for 100 years, because of the successful implementation of vaccination. So this is just a very brief discussion on the development of Chinese medicine in the history with regards to different disciplines. In the next video, we will discuss the medical affairs system and education.